The cage door dropped behind me before the crowd noise even finished rolling down the tiers, and I was already walking forward because stopping in a fighting pit gets you killed faster than anything the beast does. 61 years old. Bad knee. A discharge paper from a war nobody on this rock had heard of, and a promoter who'd seen my file and decided I was exactly the kind of name that fills seats when it gets torn apart. Final bout of the night. The announcer's voice crackled out across the coarse hollow pit, bouncing off 3 tiers of alien faces packed shoulder to shoulder under sodium lights. The Hollow's newest acquisition, Undefeated, against a pause built for laughs, and got them, a retired human soldier the promoter found sweeping floors at the transit depot. That last part was true. I'd been sweeping floors. A man's got to eat. Stain had found me 3 weeks back, going through transit depot personnel files looking for exactly this kind of story: a veteran, a uniform photo from younger years, a service record with enough campaign ribbons to look impressive on a fight poster and not so many that anyone would ask hard questions about what those campaigns had actually cost. He'd offered me 4 weeks' wages for 1 night in the sand. I'd said no twice. The third time, my landlord had posted a notice on my door, and 4 weeks' wages stopped being an insult and started being rent. I hadn't told him the other reason I'd finally said yes. That somewhere in 30 years of service, in places this colony's charter maps didn't even bother naming, I'd spent more nights than I could count standing very still in front of something with teeth, waiting to find out whether it had already decided to kill me. You learn things about that kind of waiting that don't show up on a discharge paper. You learn the difference between an animal that's been made to hate you, and an animal that's just been handed no other choice. Promoter Yarrow Stain stood up in his private box, all silk collar and rings, lifting both arms to the crowd like he'd personally invented the joke. He hadn't even looked at me yet. Didn't need to. He'd already decided what tonight's story was: old human gets shredded, betting slips get torn up, everybody laughs on the way out. Across the sand, a gate ground open, and the thing they'd bought came through low and fast. It was a terror-hound, proper apex breed, the kind frontier ranchers paid fortunes to keep off their herds. Lean, 400 pounds easy, hide the gray of old gunmetal with faint blue luminescence striping down the ribs that pulsed when it was excited. Scars crossed its shoulders in old white lines. Its name, painted crude on the side of its transport crate, was THREX. The crowd screamed when it cleared the gate. I didn't move. Not bravado. Just math. Running gives a predator a reason. Standing still gives it a decision to make. Threx came across the sand at a trot, head low, lips already curling back off teeth built to open a man like a tin can. 20 feet out it dropped into the stalking crouch, every line of its body coiled to cross that last gap in one motion. I did the only thing 30 years of dealing with frightened, furious things had ever taught me. I went still, dropped my eyes off its face, a stare's a challenge, every soldier who'd ever worked with war dogs back home knew that, and I said, "Low," the way you'd talk a spooked animal down off a ledge, not a word the crowd could even hear over their own noise. Easy. Nobody's making you do this either. Threx's stalking crouch hitched. Just for a half second. A hitch any handler in that arena would have called a flinch and bet against. But I'd spent 3 decades reading exactly that kind of hesitation in things that wanted to kill me, and this wasn't fear. It was recognition trying to find its feet. It came the rest of the way slower. Stopped at 10 feet. Sniffed the air between us like it was reading a page. The crowd noise dropped half a register, confused, like a held breath nobody had agreed to hold. Finish it, Stain called down, irritation cracking through the showman voice now. Handler. Drive it in. A man with a shotgun jogged out from the side gate and jabbed it toward Threx's flank. The hound didn't even turn its head. It just sat, folded down onto its haunches in the middle of the sand, 6 feet from me, ears forward, that pulsing blue stripe along its ribs slowing to something almost like a heartbeat. I'd seen that posture exactly once before, a lifetime ago, in a war dog kennel on a muddy forward base, The day a young K9 named Mose decided a half-dead corporal dragging himself back from a blown checkpoint was worth more than the handler who'd raised him from a pup. Some animals choose. Nobody trains that choosing into them. You just hope you're standing close enough when it happens. It's not attacking, somebody in the frontier said, loud enough to carry, and that was the moment the whole pit went quiet enough to hear sand shift. Stain was on his feet now, leaning over the rail. Goaded again. The handler did. Threx's head came around, not at me, at him, and the growl that came out of that animal's chest was a sound that made 3 full rows of spectators stand up and back away from the rail at once. Not the snarl of a beast that wants a fight. The flat, final warning of something that has already decided who in this arena it is willing to hurt, and it is not the man standing still. The handler dropped the goad in the sand and walked himself back through the gate without being told twice. I crouched down, slow, both palms open, the same motion I'd have used for any spooked dog, any nervous horse, any half-feral thing that had decided I wasn't the danger in the room, and I put my hand flat in the air a foot from that hound's scarred face and waited. Threx leaned into it. Pressed its skull against my palm hard enough to nearly take my balance, and made a sound low in its chest that had nothing to do with the growl from 30 seconds before. Somewhere up in the stands, an Olith merchant in his formal collar had both hands pressed over his mouth. A pair of Corvin dockworkers near the rail had gone dead silent, the kind of silent that only happens when something rearranges what you thought the universe's rules were. I didn't look up at any of them. I kept my hand on the side of that animal's jaw and let it lean. This is a malfunction, Stain was shouting now, voice gone thin and high. The beast is defective, pull it, refund every. Sir. The arena's licensing officer, a thin Verith woman in a grey inspector's sash, had come down from the upper tier without anyone noticing, and she was already keying something into a slate. Section 9 of the Exhibition Charter. An apex predator that voluntarily withdraws from combat against a human handler is logged as a recognition event, not a malfunction. I'm required to log it. I'm logging it. It's a dog that's supposed to kill people for money, Stain said. It's supposed to fight, the officer corrected, not looking up from her slate. Tonight it chose not to. I don't write the rules of instinct, Promoter Stain. I just record them. Threx, for its part, had stopped paying either of them any attention at all. It had turned its scarred head and laid it across my knee, 400 pounds of frontier apex predator settling into the sand of a fighting pit like it had finally found the one corner of the arena worth staying in. I sat there in the dirt with my hand on a terror-hound skull while a few thousand spectators of 6 different species tried to figure out what they'd just watched, and I thought about Mose, and about a war that had ended a long time ago in a place far from here, and about how some things in this universe still recognize a tired man who never raised a hand against anything that hadn't already raised one first. Stain didn't get his refund. The licensing officer's report went up the chain by morning, and within a week the betting board outside the hollow had a new line scrawled under the old odds in chalk that nobody bothered to erase, still on the roster. Undefeated. Won't fight him. I kept sweeping floors at the depot during the day. Most nights, though, I walked the long way home past the pit's holding pens, and there was always a low gray shape already waiting at the fence, blue stripe pulsing slow and patient, like it had been counting the minutes since I'd left. Nobody ever managed to sell that hound to another handler again. Word travels fast in a small enough town, and the word, in the end, was simple: some apex animals don't need taming. They just need to meet the one person in the room who was never going to be afraid of them, and never going to hurt them either, and once they find him, that's the whole fight, decided, forever.